Microphones are important. What's going on out there, Roto Scouts football fans? Welcome to the show, gang. Thursday evening, another Thursday night football slate for us. A little showdown action, a little single game action if you're a FanDuel gamer. We've got Trey McKelly in the chat. Calvin Dunn, Aloysius is here. Oh, I've got YouTube open. I can hear myself. That's never good. Had to grab the Twitter link and send out a little note. I forgot to tell everybody on Twitter that this was going down today, but hopefully some people heard when we were here for the baseball show. Hopefully some other folks caught it, figured it out. See if we can drop a link into the chat, or I'll just tell everybody. Hey, let me just grab it. You know, these are the things. All the other stuff, kind of, I'm getting by at worst, kind of doing well with a lot of the stuff in terms of like being able to handle a lot of this myself and so on and so on. The stuff I'm really bad at is this stupid shit like this. Just tweeting out links, making sure that people know that the content and the shows and whatnot are live, that they're happening at all. That's the stuff I'm bad at. If you get a chance, follow the @RotoScouts Twitter handle. Help us out a little bit. Get those when I manage to get the word out. Spread the word. Help like, retweet, all that fun stuff. Steven Leibowitz is here. What's up, Steven? Arkathelza. Yo, what's up, buddy? Michael Knack. Let's go. I agree. Steven says, I thought that was Joker's job. Yeah, social media manager, he is not. He just came in. He was out in the backyard giving me a tough time about wanting to come back in, but I managed to wrangle him in. Cat's all locked up. We should be good to go. Feeling a little bit better than I was earlier. Still a little bit sniffly. Forgive the tissues and whatnot, but we'll plow through this one. Interesting game. I think it's going to be a fun game. Kind of looking forward to it from a DFS perspective. I think there should be some scoring. We've got a 49-point total. Philly favored by 6.5 last I looked. But I think it feels like it'll be a little closer than that. Minnesota's D is obviously not very good at all. And Philly's got a pretty weaponized offense, and particularly against this kind of a scheme. I just think that Minnesota is going to be able to answer back, even against Philly's pretty good defense. Minnesota's passing game was pretty much in order last week, and they've obviously got one major weapon and several good pieces, and a pretty good quarterback. So I think they're going to throw a lot again this week. I think it's going to be a back and forth kind of a game, at least for a while, and it should be a lot of good opportunities for fantasy. I think there's a couple interesting wrinkles that we can tuck into. So let's get into it. I'll pull up the old board here. Let me grab a little sip of the old iced tea there. So Trey saying Philly weak up the middle, so it could be a little bit of bonus in terms of like some of the passing game over the middle, and then certainly being able to rush the ball a little bit, which would be nice. Alexander Madison, not exactly a huge game the last time out, but yeah, there's definitely going to be some opportunities across the field, I think. So definitely should be good passing conditions for both of these teams. I've got a massive projection on Jalen Hurts. Obviously, you can see it down on the board there, and it's been up on the website all day. Got him clearing the bonus on DK. That's why that one's so high. But biggest projection I saw around the industry for Jalen Hurts, and happy to take it. I think he's going to have a monster game. Had a monster against this team last season. Could be poised to do the exact same. Obviously, he can do things on the ground with his running ability as well to pad his stats. So I think it's going to be a monster for him. But just to get into to some of it, Philly obviously good on both sides of the ball. 4th ranked DVOA projections for offense, 9th ranked projected DVOA for defense, 16th on offense for Minnesota, just kind of middle of the pack, and then 32nd ranked defense by DVOA for the Minnesota side. They were, did I put it in here? I thought I had it in here. I guess I didn't. I thought I had their numbers from last season in here. I can grab it real quick. When I say in here, I mean in the notes that I'm looking at that you guys can't see. Ooh, that was a big file. Big, dark mess. Last season, Minnesota was 26th against the pass, 19th against the run. Philly was 1st against the pass, 19th against the run. Tied for 19th against the run, it looks like. So Cousins definitely going to have his work cut out for him. That's for sure. But he had kind of a better than it seemed like game last week. or on Sunday. He was definitely one of the plays we were on. I had him projected out a little ahead of the industry, and I feel like we weren't really wrong. He was 33 of 44 for, oh, let me, real quick. I built out some new dashboards for us. Do you guys see that? Does that look all right? Yeah, that works. So this should make it a little bit easier to talk through some of the position by position. I'll just separate it out. I've got quarterbacks, receiver, running backs, and then the pass catchers, and then we'll just kind of talk, defense kickers if you guys want. But this is just last week's stats. Some of the advanced stats. Found a good advanced stats board up on Fantasy Pros, actually. Just another plug for those guys. They're doing some really good stuff for football. So just a good statistical board that had a lot of the stuff I was looking for in one spot. So I was able to grab it, create a new little dashboard here. I'll add to this as we go, and I'll work some different stuff in here. But I thought it was a pretty good way to just break this slate down. And if we're looking at Kirk Cousins off the top, 33 of 44 last week. He threw 44 passes, completed 75% of them, 344 yards. I think that kind of went by the wayside, the fact that he threw 344 yards last week, because he had the 2 fumbles and an interception that just cut his fantasy score down dramatically, which really sucked, especially for those of us who were pretty overweight to Kirk Cousins shares last week. Should have been a better game. Had 2 touchdown passes. He was sacked twice. He was hurried 4 times. 4.9 air yards per attempt. He had 1 40-yard pass, 3 30-yard passes, 5 20 yards. I mean, this, as you're looking through here, there's a lot of deep action here. And he's obviously throwing a lot of that to Jefferson. Jefferson went, I'll try not to bounce around this much. I'll just talk about him. Jefferson has 9 of 12, 150 yards, 9.2 air yards per target. Or per reception, rather. I got to remember that some of this new stuff is, these are per reception when I'm usually talking per target, so it's going to take me a second to get adjusted to some of this stuff. I might reset some of it and just do some calculations to get the per target numbers up instead, because I prefer the per target rather than the per catch. But I think it's perfectly fine either way. On the Jalen Hurts side of things, 22 of 33 threw way fewer passes, only 170 yards. 5.2 yards per attempt, 3.5 air yards per attempt. Not much deep. He was working a little bit shorter when he was throwing to Devonta Smith. A.J. Brown, 33% target share for Brown, only had 79 yards, only 1 catch over 20 yards. So they weren't working quite as deep. Hurts also ran the ball 9 times for 37 yards, 4.1 yards per rush attempt. Lost a fumble, which is always a problem when we're dealing with rushing quarterbacks. It's always a little bit of a risk, but obviously you're picking up a big gain by going with some of the rushing quarterbacks, going up against a bad D. So I think there's major opportunity for Hurts to really come out there, sling the ball around a little bit, run a little bit, get himself a nice chunk of yardage, get himself in the end zone a couple times, whether he's running it or throwing it. It's obviously looking at the monster fantasy point projection, looking at the most expensive player on the board. We'll talk about lineup construction. We've talked about it before. But I think that Hurts is one of those quarterbacks that works kind of as a little bit of an exception to our, we don't want to necessarily plug quarterbacks right into the captain role. We've also got, actually, Justin Jefferson's the most expensive player on the DK slate. 12-4 as a flex, 18-6 as a captain. So that makes Justin Jefferson kind of function like a quarterback on this slate. And in some ways, he's a little bit lower ceiling than a lot of quarterbacks. So if we see quarterbacks at those aggressively high salaries when it's multiplied, limit the upside, limit the ceiling, and limit the victories for a lot of DK lineups in Showdown, that's got to be a little bit of a concern. I would definitely have some Jefferson in the captain spot. I would definitely have some Jalen Hurts in the captain spot. And I think that his running ability accelerates his ability beyond what most quarterbacks can do in those spots. Get you the big game a little bit more often. So he's one of the more playable opportunities there. And then I think Kirk Cousins is just cheap on this slate. 92, 13, 8. It does have the same limiting impact, but it's a little bit lessened by the fact that he's just a little bit cheap. So I really like that opportunity. I think you can plug all 3 of those guys into the captain role, of course, and you're going to want to, and you're going to want to have a fair number of lineups dedicated to that. But you're always going to be making sacrifices down lineup when you're putting the super expensive plays up there. And we've got some weapons on both sides that are reasonable alternatives. A.J. Brown, obviously, is a reasonable alternative to Justin Jefferson if you're just looking to put a wide out in the captain role. Devonta Smith is a reasonable alternative to A.J. Brown if you're looking for an even cheaper option there. on the same offense who does see the same kind of volume, just not quite as deep. So I think there's a lot of different ways to approach it. I don't know how much, you can definitely use some Alexander Madison in that role. But given how limited he was last time out, I don't know how much I want that. The Philly rushing game's kind of a mess. You've got TJ Hawkinson, you've got Jordan Addison on the to support the Viking side of things in the passing game. I think either one of those guys perfectly viable in the captain role, where you're not paying a premium. You probably need the touchdown. I don't think either one of them is going to win it for you on yards unless it's a ridiculously low-scoring game. And then you've got some cheapo options. You've got some Swift. You've got some Penny. You've got guys like that. You've got some KJ Osborne, who's not incapable by any means and is not that expensive. You've got the defenses, the kickers. Defenses and kickers don't win it all that frequently, but we've seen some weird stuff already this season, and it's only week 1 or week 2 now. So I do think you can get creative at the captain spot today. It's going to be an obstacle to play Justin Jefferson there. But he and Jalen Hurts are easily the most likely guys to just go off and have that explosive must-have captain score. But I wouldn't sell Kirk Cousins all that short. I like the idea of having Cousins in the captain spot if you can afford it with Jalen Hurts in your lineup as well. And then maybe you have to pivot to like a Hawkinson-Addison combination or something, or an Addison-KJ Osborne and hope that he hits them both for touchdowns. There's a lot of different ways to put it together. And remember, it's not always the most expensive, highly projected guy in the captain role necessarily, even if he has a game. Even if Jefferson goes out and has a game, that price, relative to what it does downstream in that lineup, has a big, big impact. Might not be the most valuable captain. Arcathelza says, I have so much Penny. Yeah, it's going to be problematic. Jason Turner points out Philly dealing with 3 injuries in the secondary, starters that are out. So that's a plus. I don't have those names off the top of my head. I'm not sure. I know I saw it earlier, but I forget who's in, who's out. I pay so little attention to defense, I got to be honest. But, yeah, key info there, obviously. Only enhances the Vikings passing game that I was already kind of liking. On the running side of things, Madison, 34 yards on 11 carries last time out. 3.1 yards per attempt. Got tackled for a loss twice. 3 catches on 4 targets. Did get 2 targets in the red zone and did score a touchdown in the air, which is kind of interesting. 11.5 on FanDuel, kind of a premium for a guy who was involved that little. They were just slinging the ball around a lot last time out. But he did get a few looks in the passing game. He's not inept on the ground when they're feeding the ball a little bit more. 11 carries, you'd like to see a little bit more. You'd like to see a little bit more productivity. But it's on the board. Oh, that's weird. I accidentally copied the wrong headings there. This is yards per attempt. This is not yards before contact or yards after contact, though. I don't think I put those in. Either way. So no big plays, 9-yard long for him. But he was the most productive of the running backs that are going to be in this game last week. Who else do we have? What else are we looking at here? Ty Chandler, he got 3 carries, 0 yards, 1 for 1 receiving for 18 yards. He's probably their number 2. Very, very cheap. I think when we're looking for like cheapo mix-ins, if you get him in the end zone, maybe. But given that there's no volume there, very, very limited opportunities, it's very thin. I talked about it a lot in the other shows for the single game slates. We do want to embrace the possible over the probable with some of these, especially when they're very cheap on DK. I like him better than CJ Ham. Ham got 2 catches on 3 targets for 7 yards last time out, so 0 carries. He's 400, 600 across DK, 5,500 over on FanDuel. Not ideal that he didn't carry the ball last time out. Very limited. I greatly prefer the passing game for the Vikings side. But those guys are, keys to helping pay the bills for some of the more expensive guys. I just think if you're doing that, you're probably way better off just going to Penny, even though the world's going to be there. Probably better off going to some shares of Boston Scott, even though he'll be a little bit popular. Penny didn't play last week. DeAndre Swift only carried the ball once for 3 yards last week. Gainwell got most of the looks in the ground game. DeAndre Swift got 2 targets last week, caught one of them for 3 yards. He just wasn't involved very much at all. Boston Scott had a carry for 3 yards, had a target also for 3 yards. Or no, excuse me, had a target and a catch. I guess that's for 0 yards. Because his long, oh no, that was his, excuse me, his long was 3. So his catch was for less than 3 yards. Let's put it that way. Because that long of 3 came on that one. What's up, Vic David Figueroa? Nate D says it's easy game. CJ Ham, first touchdown. Love it. Is it crazy to think that he might get a look? I mean, he was slightly involved. Is there anything notes-wise that I didn't see? I'm just looking for like around sites. his most recent note up on one of the sites is from week 15 of last year. Not great. Doesn't project for like anything, you know. It's CJ's right here. We're sub 1 in terms of the projection, right? So these are the guys I typically end up taking out. They draw a little bit of projection just by virtue of they're going to be wearing a uniform. Some of these guys play on special teams. So like Ham may or may not come out. Johnny Munt probably coming out. Do we think that Myles Gaskin gets any touches? He was on the practice squad. They cut him, signed him to the practice squad, then brought him back. I'm curious about that because he's not completely incapable. Gaskin, not much here in terms of the history from last year. 0 touchdowns, 2.5 rushing attempts per game, 3 targets a game, limited action. He's going to be on the team. I don't know if he's dressing, active. I haven't caught up to it, but obviously, you know, super, super low projected. Is there any update? These are the guys where it gets weird around, like, you know, he's most likely just, not Gaskin specifically, but guys that it's just like, you know, most likely a punt returner, but might get 2 catches or might get 2 targets in the offense. And those are kind of, those 2 targets could be kind of crucial for our purposes when they're super cheap guys. Guy that I do think is pretty interesting in this Vikings offense that's super cheap is the guy I just landed on here, Josh Oliver. We'll obviously talk about TJ Hawkinson first. Let's just look at the passing game overall. Should I continue going through the, let's do it that way. Let me finish going through the running back position. So Gaskin on the board there at 200, 300. Obviously didn't play last week, was on the practice squad last week. No real idea what to expect. Stephen Leibowitz says, nah, if active, maybe in 150 max, you get a share. Gaskin's and Vic David Figueroa's best ball. Hope he gets runs soon. Yeah, look, I mean, to Steven's point, you know, those are the guys that I'll have in a couple of entries in 150 because those are the guys that are going to be the differentiators. I typically like to do it with like a tight end who's like the second tight end, like Oliver today, where I think he's getting 2-3 targets, might get one of them in the end zone. You get that really separates you. Blake Bell the first week, what's his face, the receiver that we were on the first Thursday game. So those are the guys that you do want to get to. Rashee Rice was the guy's name. Those are the guys you do want to get to some degree, but I don't necessarily like doing it with like the 4th man on the depth chart at running back. The 4th man on the depth chart is a receiver, maybe as a pass catcher, whether he's a wide out, a tight end, whatever. If you're 4th in the pecking order for passes and Kirk Cousins is going to throw 45 times, you'll get a couple looks. So that's a very different play. I really don't like doing it all that much with running backs. Whereas wide receivers, tight ends, especially wide receivers that do end up returning punts. I mean, the kid who returned the kick the other night was potentially a game winner for somebody if he was in a lineup for the Jets. So, you know, plays like that can be difference making. I don't know that CJ Ham, Myles Gaskin are the right guys for that. On the Philly side, I talked about DeAndre Swift. I talked about, Rashad Penny wasn't on the team last week. He might come in here and steal most of the looks. I think it seems like that's something that a lot of people are kind of expecting here. He's got to be popular at these prices. And I think it's justifiable. He's a pretty decent running back. Last season, 2 TDs. I think I got this in my notes, actually. I could just read this rather than struggling to find the right columns. 6.1 yards per rush attempt on 12.2 touches a game, 69.2 yards a game, and 2 touchdowns last year. Only 1 target per game. So if you think about like maybe he's the lead back and then Swift gets some of the action through the air. Maybe they work in some Boston Scott. It's going to be annoying. It's probably going to be Boston Scott scoring 2 touchdowns at low ownership kind of a day. I will have some Boston Scott. 75 on FanDuel is really high for that player. 7,000 for Penny feels a lot better. But I definitely want to have a good mix of all 3 of these backs because I think they're all going to touch the football. I just don't know exactly how things are going to fall. It would make a lot of sense to me to see Penny be the lead back, see Swift be in there for passing downs and third down action, and then Boston Scott just kind of threaded in between. Scott did get a target the last time out. He did get the 1 carry for the 3 yards. But if that 3 yards happens to be a burst through the through the line into the end zone, you're probably going to want it. Vic David says it's a Penny day. Clueless on Swift. Yeah, I thought he was going to see a lot more volume than they gave him in the first game. So that's kind of surprised me as well. I didn't have a ton of them, but I'm kind of glad. But I certainly thought they were going to be, more involved, step into that kind of Miles Sanders-ish role. Eagles did not go deeper than 3 wides in week 1. It's another good point from Stephen Leibowitz. And, I mean, that's kind of borne out in what we see in both the numbers and just how this projects. Quez Watkins clinging to relevance at the bottom of the board. He only got 2 targets last week. So not only did they not go more than 3 wide, they didn't go to their third option all that much at all. Dallas Goedert only got 1 target last week. It was just the A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith show. 10 targets apiece, 66% of the action. Right? 33.3% apiece of the target shares. Like I said before, A.J. was getting the deeper looks. He had 9.4 air yards per catch. A little bit more implied air yards per target, the way that I like to do it. But this is, relevant as well. 11.3 yards, caught 10 passes, 79 yards, 23-yard long, had a drop, which we're calling a Tony on the board. Goddard, 1 red zone target. So his 1 look was in the red zone. Oh, no, excuse me. That's Devonta. Devonta got a red zone target and got in the end zone. Goddard got no red zone targets, which is also kind of surprising. But just 1 look the entire game. So just not great, not normal. Dallas Goedert normally gets 5.8 targets a game. Where is it? Yeah, 5.8 targets a game. Last season, he was seeing 10.17 yards per target, scored 3 times. Very good tight end. Definitely on the board. Can't imagine they're not going to look his way a little bit more often this time. Quez, two targets is concerning. Caught them both. 17 yards. 8.5 yards per catch and only a 1.5 air yards. So he's working around the line as well, I guess. Not ideal. Olamide Zakai is going to be returning punts. So maybe you work him in. Maybe he gets on the field as a 4th receiver at some point. But they also added Britton Covey back to the active roster for this week. So, maybe he ends up being the punt returner. He was last year's punt returner, elevated from the practice squad. No idea if he gets on the field. Jack Stoll, Grant Calcaterra are just depth tight ends. These guys are out of my player pool. They drew a little tiny projection. That's why they're here. But I don't think either one of these guys is going to be relevant, even at their cheap prices. These aren't the projections we're looking for. So it is really kind of a concentrated offense for Philly. I almost said limited, and that's not the correct word because I think they're going to come out here and put up a pretty big game. I think their quarterback's going to have a monster. They're 2 wideouts, but it's really, it's these 3 guys, this guy, and then kind of good luck with the running back situation. Jake Elliott was definitely interesting. 4 field goals and then 1 of 2 extra points the last time out. If they have that kind of game again, if they're not getting in the end zone, he could see a little bit more action. Obviously, a very, very, very good kicker. But overall, I don't know. Kind of very concentrated, very specific. You know what you're getting from Philly. You're getting a ton of action for these guys. No idea where the ball's going in terms of the ground game. But yeah, it's the three primaries in the passing game are really the skill players that I want. And then I'll thread in some shares of the running backs, probably just focusing on value and ownership for the running back side of things, at least as far as Philly goes. Maybe get a little bit more invested in Alexander Mattison, but if we're thinking that Minnesota's going to be playing from behind, given that Kirk Cousins threw 44 passes last time out, I expect them to be slinging the ball around a lot too. So I don't know that Mattison gets much more than his 11 carries from last week, and he didn't really do anything with it. Maybe he gets involved a little bit more through the passing game. He did have the 4 targets, 2 red zone targets, and the receiving touchdown. On Minnesota's side, obviously you've got J. Jeff, nice and pricey up at the top, $16,000 on the FanDuel slate, $5,500 more than any other receiver on the board. No, that's not true. More than any receiver on his team. Forgot AJ's on the other side. $3,000 more than AJ. $3,500 more than Devonta Smith. It's worth it. 9 catches, 150 yards, 12 targets, 27.3% target share. Hawkinson was the more involved of the tight ends in the entire game, 20.5% target share, 9 targets last week, 35 yards. Obviously, Justin Jefferson is an air yards monster, a yard per catch monster, 16.7 yards per catch, 9.2 air yards per catch. Had the 40-plus, 42-yard long. Jordan Addison had a red zone target. Ended up going 4 for 6 for 61 yards, 13.6% volume. KJ Osborne got the same 6 targets. So they spread the ball around fairly effectively. Addison was 61 yards, 14.3 air yards per reception, 39-yard long. Osborne, 19-yard long, 10 air yards per reception. So they're getting to these guys a little bit deep. And then Josh Oliver, the tight end that I mentioned before, 3 targets last week, 32, caught all 3 of them, 32 yards. Saw a look in the red zone, didn't get it in the end zone, but saw a red zone target. That's all I need to know. If they're willing to throw this guy over TJ Hawkinson when they're in the red zone, I am happy to include him at 6,500, at 800 or 1,200. Well, not necessarily as a captain, but at 800 on the DK slate in the flex, 65 on the FanDuel slate in the flex. That's the kind of Noah Fant scoring a touchdown and getting some yards on 2 catches kind of a play that can win you a whole lot of money on one of these. So I like Josh Oliver tonight. I would wager I'm going to be well ahead of the field on a play like that. Powell hasn't scored a touchdown since 2020. He's got 2 in his career. They both came in 2020. I believe he's just here for special teams. Jalen Naylor, 0 targets, 0 catches last week. Also, I think just special teamer. Correct me if I'm wrong. If anybody's expecting those guys to do anything this week, I'm not. They were drawing minimal projections on the board. Onesies, pointsies. Like a half a catch. Talked about the Eagles receivers. Talked about the Minnesota receivers. So we've got, plays here. And here. Those are really our priority receivers. I would include Quez, no doubt about it. But obviously the volume's not there. He's never really given us all that much of anything. Last season, 3 TDs. 354 yards, 6.94 yards per target with a 9-yard ADOT. On how many targets a game? 3 targets a game. Not ideal. So I think it's, very specific plays. Solid little piece of value. KJ is probably going to go a little under-owned overall for his skill set for the fact that he did see 6 targets. I feel like people lean Addison a little bit more there. And KJ is a little bit less expensive. A lot less expensive on the FanDuel slate. Last season he was, where'd he go? 5 TDs, 8.3 yard ADOT, 650 yards, 7.22 yards per target on 5.3 targets a game. So he was more limited in terms of targets last week than he was overall on the average last year. Maybe we see a little bit of an uptick in targets this week. Didn't have Addison there last year. I don't dislike him as a potentially under the radar guy, or just, whichever one of these prime receivers goes under owned compared to the rest of them. It just makes some of those decisions pretty easy on a single game slate where you can just say, all right, the field's here. I'm just going over here. These guys getting the same looks, similar talents. Travis Wyndham says, hello all. Quick rundown, or should I rewind? You definitely rewind if you want to. We went through some stuff there. But, overall, Trav, like I was just saying, I do think it's kind of a straightforward game. The skill players are extreme skill players at the top. And then the targets, the guys who are going to be touching the ball outside of that Philly running game are fairly obvious. I do think, like what I was just getting into there, that Josh Oliver is kind of an interesting, cheapo, sneaky tight end. Needs to get in the end zone. Needs to put one of his 3 targets in the end zone because he's not going to see much more than the 3 he saw last week. But the fact that they targeted him in the red zone is interesting to me in this situation. So he would be, since you asked if there was a wild card there, he'd probably be my wild card guy today. It's not an extreme high one where I'm expecting him to get 7 catches. It's not a Puka or anything like that. But I think it's an interesting enough play for a showdown if he gets in the end zone. Outside of him, I don't love it on the Minnesota side. You could maybe throw Quez into that bucket. I have less faith, but he's obviously got a skill set that fits deep catch, take it for a touchdown. If you've got him at low ownership and he takes one to the house, you're obviously you're doing well. But you're also paying $8,000 for him on the FanDuel slate. Much more reasonable at $3,000 on the DK slate, I think. But Josh Oliver is only $800 if we're talking wild cards. Oh, you got it, Trev. All you had to do is ask. Trey's between AJ Brown, Boston Scott, or Devonta and Swift. Leaning the former. I think I would go the former. Why not? Take the upside of AJ. Take the upside of the low-owned or lower-owned stupid Boston Scott multiple touchdown game. Could happen. Has happened. So, yeah, I don't disagree with that decision, Trey. Stephen Leibowitz hopes that people fade Dallas Goedert. I would love to see that. Trey's thinking about going Addison captain. I don't disagree with that. Look, it's not going to all be Justin Jefferson show. It's going to mostly be the Justin Jefferson show, but those other guys are going to get in the end zone a few times. I like the idea of a Hawkinson captain. I like the idea of an Addison captain. Probably stretching it if you're going to these guys in your captain role. Maybe KJ gets you there. Maybe. If I was building 150 on DK, I would probably have some KJ captains. I will probably have some KJ MVPs on FanDuel. Just because those are the plays that I enjoy making. And if he goes out and he puts up 110 yards and 2 touchdowns, we're home. Travis has a feeling that Boston Scott will get one, maybe a pair, but that wouldn't make much sense. That's exactly why it's probably going to happen. And that's, again, with these, exclusively these, we want to talk some about possible. We want to consider some about possible. Low-end guys, down the depth chart guys, 4th receiver, 2nd tight end, so on and so forth. Guys that are going to get just a couple of looks. Man, that one catch can make a giant difference if it gets in the end zone. And there's only so many opportunities overall to go around in this game, right? So there's no guarantees of success anywhere. There's a lot of ways that you can twist the slate to your will. And if you happen to have that right lineup, or you have it a couple times with certain combinations in different order, different guys in the captain spot, and you're covering it a few different times, once something like, from that last Thursday game, once something like that pairing of Rice and Bell hit, and I've talked about this a couple times since, but it's really important to reiterate, once both of those guys had gotten in the end zone, people who had both of those guys in a lineup were competing against about 200 other people in a contest that had 192,000 entries on FanDuel. That's what happens when you have those correct plays and when you hit them. You just completely draw down the entire field, and now there's this whole group of the rest of the field that is offset from where you're at. It's obviously going to lose more than it wins, but when it wins, or at least it trims dramatically the number of times you're tied. And that's all you can really hope for in these showdown slates. Yeah, you do get unique winners from time to time. Odds are there's going to be a tie for the win. So what you want is to not be the chalkiest possible combination, and you want to be spread out, so you want to tie with 3 people, 5 people, even 10 people can still be at a very nice payday. The last thing you want is to have one of these lineups that ties 500 times and you win, but you're getting paid out, nothing. So it's really, really critical to differentiate lineups and embrace some of these lower owned plays and just take it for a win, or it's a pass fail, right? It's a win or it's a win loss. It's a pass fail, whatever you want to call it. We're not worried about cashing these lineups. We want to win this tournament. We want to tie for the win. Let's see if this is working. Tis. Bear with me one sec. Come on. All right, so speaking of that, I brought this up last time out, and this time it's actually working. That's here, which is a plus. All right, so I just pulled these lineups out of the optimizer, and as I showed last week, we've got some calculations of the projections, and the most important column to me when I'm sorting lineups. Let me shrink this down so you guys can see it a little bit better. Most important column is this one. Just how unique are these lineups? It's exactly what I was just talking about. And the way that I handle it is to quite literally, usually I dedupe these lineups first, but this is only one lineup set. So this is a great example. A.J. Brown in the MVP spot, Dallas Goedert, DeAndre Swift, Alexander Madison, Jalen Hurts. It's going to be owned 1 in every 429 lineups. Thereabouts, right? These aren't exact numbers, obviously. That's essentially worthless, even if it wins. How many times is that going to be tied in a contest with 190,000 entries? Quite a few. I literally go through and I trim everything 5,000 or less. Takes some time, takes a lot of good lineups out of the pool, like this one. All right, this one's even a 1 in 5, even with Olamide Zacchaeus in it. That's how crazy some of these ownership numbers can get. So you really want to be careful. That one probably could play because not many people are going to be playing Olamide Zacchaeus. It's probably not worth playing him. Like Jalen Hurts, MVP, KJ, DeAndre Swift, Devonta Smith, Alexander Madison, 1 in 500 times. Justin Jefferson, Penny, Devonta Smith, Madison, AJ, 1 in 1,200. It's just not worth it. You want to get some of the differentiated ones down here. Some of these, again, I didn't actually take guys out of the player pool before I ran these off just before. So you've got some weird ones like Britton Covey in here. I'm probably going to have him out of the player pool. But like this AJ Quez, Ty Chandler, probably going to have him out of the pool. Believe me, you can get to some realistic lineups by doing this. Here you go. Justin Jeff, Boston Scott, Josh Oliver. No, that's got Chandler in it too. That's too shitty. When the pool is better, this makes more sense. But the point is you don't want these extremely, extremely common lineups. You just don't want them, even though they look good. Makes sense, guys? I think it makes sense. I think we talked about everything. These single game shows, I mean, it's 38 minutes. It's not fast, but they go quick compared to all the other stuff. Jeff Morgan, what's the backfield looking tonight? Ugly. Ugly on both sides, kind of. A lot more questions on the Eagles side, obviously. Well, just let me back in. Where the hell did it go? Well, it's not letting me reshare that screen. The dashboard screen. Hang on. There we go. So, the backfield, just to get one last look at it. I don't really see much on the board for Ty Chandler, CJ Ham, Myles Gaskin on the Vikings side. Somebody's going to touch the ball a few times. Chandler touched it 3 times last week. 1 target, 1 catch, 2-yard long. Madison touched it 11 times, 34 yards, 4 targets, 3 catches. it's pretty limited. I think the Vikings are going to be slinging the ball around the field again. To reiterate, Kirk Cousins threw 44 passes last week, threw for over 300 yards. Would have had a better game had he not fumbled the ball twice, thrown an interception. He would have put up a pretty good fantasy game last week. Had those, obviously, had this not happened, had that not happened, yeah, of course. But it was on the field, like 344 yards. Fumbled one back down in the red zone or close to the red zone. That probably cost them at least cost them a shot at a touchdown, if not an actual touchdown. On the Philly side, you've just got the three-headed monster in Swift, Penny, and Scott. Swift didn't get nearly the volume we were expecting last time out. Only 2 targets, 1 catch, a 3-yard long. He ran the ball 1 time for 3 yards. Boston Scott also got 1 carry for 3 yards, 1 target, 1 catch. And Rashad Penny wasn't active last week. Gainwell got most of the action. He's inactive this week. I could see a world where Penny gets most of the carries, Swift gets most of the looks in the passing game, and Boston Scott scores 2 touchdowns. It wouldn't surprise me at all if that's what happened with the Philly running game. Like Penny gets, 12, 13 carries, 40 some odd yards, nothing relevant, maybe a look or 2 in the passing game, maybe 1 look in the passing game. Swift gets like a carry or 2, doesn't really do anything with them, gets like 3 or 4 looks in the passing game, maybe only 2 like he did last time out. And then when they get down near the red zone, near the goal line, those guys have both been used up on the drive, and they hand the ball to Boston Scott, and he busted through the line twice. I could totally see that happening. Those are the kind of games that Boston Scott has. Vladdy Guerrero home run. Yankees are losing again. So I think that's pretty much it, guys. Jeff Morgan says, I get not extremely common, but I'm okay winning $400 on $30 has always been my feel anyways, but you think Swift handles the lion's share. Just got here. So, yeah, I mean, look, there are different goals, obviously. If you're cashing, if you're putting in 1 entry, you obviously you want to get unique, but not crazy. If you're putting in a full field of 150, then you're just kind of, you're trying to book the win. And I think we're all trying to win the tournaments, but there's different value in, cashing, not cashing. I get that. And I don't want to talk anybody out of their approach by any means. But when you're shooting for the win, when you're looking at it as like a win or nothing kind of a scenario, that's when you really want to make sure that you're tying with as few people as possible. And even in a I'm trying to cash approach, you want to hit that cash with as few ties as possible as well, because that'll book you. That starts booking up those those cashing spots awful quick too. If there's 500 people tied with the same lineup just around the line, that's going to eat up all that share. Or if they drop below, that opens up a lot of opportunity for people. So the commonality thing is true at the cash line as well as at the top of the tournament. But yes, I get you. Just kind of went through it as far as Swift. I don't know. I could also see a world in which Swift just dominates to that point, just dominates the carries. He is probably the best running back in that group. Him and Penny are not that far apart talent wise. So yeah, it's gonna be a mess. I'm gonna have a little bit of all of it. I'm gonna try and pick off those Boston Scott TDs, but I think everybody's probably thinking that way as well. It's going to be an ugly running game. I'm excited about rostering the passing game. Not that excited about rostering the running game in this one. With that in mind, I think I'm probably going to punch out, get some lineups built. It is 7:30. We got to make sure we get this thing entered. Game starts at 8:15. It's about 45 minutes to go. Fortunately, these lineups come together really quickly. That's what I do like about these showdown slates, or one of the other things I like. It's just like click, go, zip, lineups are done. Click, go. So you can build out that pool really, really quickly. Questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, anything, gang? Cry, Eagles, cry. Let's go, Vikes, says Trey. I'm with you. Jeff Morgan says almost guaranteed for Scott. By the way, awesome to see you doing this. Used to watch you all the time on Awesome. That's great, buddy. Glad you're here. Glad you found your way over here. Not sure if you've been with us for a little bit, but happy to do it. We did it all through baseball season. We're going to be carrying through football season. We'll figure out what's going to happen with basketball, but there'll be something up there. If you haven't been to the site, Jeff, rotoscouts.com, free projections for this slate are up on the site. Going to have free projections for week 2 as well for the main slate. So, totally off chalk Swift, says Jake Swales. Move swiftly off that chalk. I like it. Scott Captain too crazy, Trey. If you're building a full suite, no. If you're building 150, I would have it a few times. 1 lineup, 3 lineups, probably a little bit much. Probably doesn't get there even if he probably need to score 2 touchdowns to get you there. Even if he scores once. 3,300 in the captain role. It's not quite cheap enough to have it be a 1 touchdown only and 3 yards, 1 touchdown. Probably doesn't get it done. It's close, but it's probably not cheap enough. 2 touchdowns to get you there. Devonta Smith ceiling game tonight in the duel with Jefferson, says Jake. Peter Porker, what Eagles pass catchers do I like? The 3 primaries, really. It's fairly straightforward with both of these teams. These 3 guys, that's it. That's an easy one. I do think that Devonta's probably going to go a little bit lesser owned than AJ, and he's got tons and tons of skill. He had an equal target volume last week at 33%, 10 targets. He was working closer to the line of scrimmage, much shorter average depth of target, but a very capable downfield receiver, a guy who could easily get in the end zone. He did get in the end zone. He saw their 1 red zone target and got it in the end zone. So I like Devonta. Not that I like him necessarily better than AJ Brown, but when we take into consideration cost and ownership and all the DFS factors, they're at least like 1-1A in my book, and I'd be happy to get over the field on Devonta while undercutting AJ if one is exceptionally higher owned by the field than the other. And then I think Dallas Goedert is definitely interesting. Only got the 1 target in a weird week last week, but typically gets a lot of looks and does a lot with them. So I like all 3 of the primaries. And then if you're throwing darts, you can throw a dart at Quez. I don't think Zacchaeus, he might get a look in the passing game. He might be returning punts, but they also reactivated Britton Covey, who was last year's kicking punt returner. And, there's the possible, there's the probable, and then there's just, throwing away shares on Olamide Zacchaeus on the idea that maybe if he's returning punts, maybe he can return one. That gets really thin. If we're talking just sneaky receivers again, kind of thinking that's my sneaky guy this week. Sneakier. Josh Oliver, cheapo, 3 targets. Saw a red zone target. I like me some of those cheap backup tight ends or second tight ends. Yeah, Pete, no worries, man. It was a good question and a good way to wrap up the show. I think that's going to be it. I'm going to wish you guys good luck. Somebody go out there and win something. If you're tied with me at the top, let's hope it's in a small tie. If you go out there and win and I don't have that lineup, I hope you bink a solo win. Go take down $1 million, 200,000, whatever your prize is. Go get them, gang. Somebody go win something tonight. See you.